complaints did grow louder, obviously, after the 2020 presidential debates, because their nominee didn't necessarily have the best, was not the best received, and got some criticism for his performance in those debates. And he was also constantly complaining about the rules. But look, I mean, the Commission on Presidential Debates, just for people who do not know, it has been around since 1987. It is an institution and it is a pillar of our democratic process. It is nonpartisan, despite whatever perceptions the Republican Party may want to put out there about how that process works. It is nonpartisan. It is meant to give time for the candidates and the country to get to know each other, particularly if you are a voter that lives in a state that is not Pennsylvania or Iowa or South Carolina or Nevada, right? Like, what is the alternative venue in our polarized and partisan climate if we are not going to have presidential debates where you have these candidates getting a chance to really introduce themselves to our entire electorate, not just the voters that they want to come out and vote for them.
Right, exactly. That's what this is all about, just narrowing the path so they just talk to the voters who they want to vote. That's what voter suppression is about as well. Victor, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this upcoming presidential election in 2024 will be the first election you're voting in. Is that correct?
It would actually be the third election I'm voting in.
The third presidential election, I mean.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
So this is your second presidential election.
Second presidential election would be correct, yes.
Okay. All right, got it. Thank you for clarifying for me. I apologize for that. But as a younger person, if the Republicans are not participating in these debates, and as you're watching what happens with January 6th, which is why they don't want to participate in debates, because they will have to ask for Donald Trump and their continued erosion of democracy, how will you and folks your age know where they stand in real time outside of press releases?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Tiffany, it's so hard to find anything these days that isn't shocking from the Republican Party. But I think this decision by the Republican Party to boycott the presidential debates isn't just shocking. It's, I think, indicative of what I think many Americans have been saying, that in America, we only have one functioning political party right now. Republicans assert that the presidential debates are somehow favored for Democrats, and so therefore they won't participate. But like Errin said, this Commission on Presidential Debates has hosted general election debates for over 30 years, and not once during that time period did a political party ever contemplate such a decision. So I think instead of what Republicans claim their reasons are for threatening to boycott the presidential debates are, I make a conjecture and say that the real reason the RNC is even considering this is perhaps that presidential candidates they put forth no longer explained to the American people why, for instance, they won't support democracy, or admit, for instance, why Donald Trump and other Republicans had a direct role in inciting the January 6th insurrection, or why they won't even support a debate, not to mention even a final vote on the Senate floor on policies like gun reform, climate change, and voting rights. So ultimately, as shocked as I think, many in my generation, as I was when I heard about this, I'd say if Republicans are unable to make their policies and positions clear to the American people and to my generation, and defend them in front of the American people, not only is Senator Romney correct in describing this as completely nuts, but I think Republicans should not be able to hold the highest office in the land from now on.
Yeah, I agree. And, if Republican voters want to reach folks your age, they should take note of such things. But, I don't know if they even want to reach people your age, to be honest with you, Victor. Carmen, you were one of the organizers of that monstrous, huge Million Woman March back in 2017. As you see democracy crumbling, as one of the architects of that wonderful movement, can you out-organize what's happening right now? Can women out-organize what's happening right now?
I do believe we can. And thank you so much, Tiffany, for having me. I do believe we can. I believe that in a democracy, we need to have a healthy debate. It's fundamental and it's essential. The American public must have the opportunity to hear multiple sides. Healthy debate expands the mind, and we need to really begin to think about how we're going to out-organize this system that continues to polarize certain individuals. My mentor and founder of my organization, the Gathering for Justice, Mr. Harry Belafonte, always says, meet people where they're at and champion them to your cause. It's what we did during the Women's March. This is actually an opportunity for candidates to win over the voters who are on the fence. I think that the real question is who is benefiting from this decision? If the American people are less informed and no longer have access to something like a debate between candidates, who does that benefit? Certainly not the American people. But it seems to me, you said this earlier, like, This is a continuation of a certain trend where increasingly a few extremist voices are controlling the Republican Party. First, they decided not to have a platform for the first time ever, and now they don't want to participate in debates. It's absurd to prohibit candidates from choosing to enter a presidential debate. This is very dangerous to our democracy and really unfair to the Republican voters.
Yeah, absolutely. And all voters, really. So if the Republican Party is in shambles, I mean, we should admit that Democrats are kind of challenged in some similar ways, namely just because Kyrsten Sinema. Democrats are not the same as Republicans by any means, but Buzzkill Senator Kyrsten Sinema tanked all hope for passing voting rights legislation by refusing to weaken the filibuster. In essence, she's decided that protecting the rights of the minority party in the Senate is more important than protecting the rights of minority voters. I could read her for the filth, but instead I'll present you with this warning from a Birmingham jail cell 50 years ago.
I must confess that over the past few years I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice.
I mean, so today, for those who don't know, Errin, I'm sure you do, my fellow ATLian, today is actually Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. Errin, I don't want to see a single nary tweet from anybody quoting Dr. King who is standing in the way of the path to the ballot box. And I just know we're about to get a flurry of these tweets from Mitch McConnell, from Kyrsten Sinema, from Joe Manchin, and it's like, miss me with all your mess. Your take on how people celebrate King Day amidst what's happening right now?
Well, you know, Tiffany, it's interesting. You mentioned Twitter. One thing that is circulating in the Twitter sphere is an old tweet from Senator Sinema, pictured next to former Congressman John Lewis, who was my congressman when I lived in Atlanta and who I covered for many years as a reporter, both for his political and civil rights legacy, posted a picture of the two of them smiling together, referring to him as my hero. And yet she is not willing to do what, frankly, is the only path, to really getting that legislation on voting rights in his name passed in a Senate, and that is getting rid of or changing the rules to the filibuster so that that legislation can move forward. Listen, at this point, Tiffany, I mean, I really think that we have to ask everyone who is expected to make that vote and have to make the case for their position on Tuesday, how is it that you support voting rights at this point if you do not support doing something about the filibuster in order to make that voting rights legislation happen? I mean, that's like me saying, well, yes, I support being COVID-free, but I'm not really interested in the vaccine. I mean, you have to take the steps necessary to bring about the thing that you say that you support. You can't just say that you support it, but then not take action to support it. And so I think, I've covered many a Martin Luther King Day holiday celebration in Atlanta, at Ebenezer Baptist Church. I've seen, lawmakers sit in the pews of that church while voting for legislation and policy that goes against the very things that Dr. King stood for. And I think that is certainly what the King family is cautioning against. They have told people specifically, do not celebrate our father's birthday if you are not prepared to do whatever it takes to get voting rights across the finish line. And I think honoring his legacy, frankly, is not going to be enough this year. I think that what people are calling for is action in the spirit of Dr. King, and that's whether that be white moderates or the entire beloved community that he spoke about and tried to bring about in his lifetime, and that ultimately, unfortunately, caused his death.
Yeah, I completely agree. And here's the thing, Carmen, that people don't want to admit. Dr. King wouldn't have rocked with any of you all. all of this, talk that people love to come out and put his quotes up, he would not have rocked with anybody. I talked in the last hour about how his polling numbers were lower than Trump's at the time of his death because people, like to cherry pick his quotes, but when it came to actual policy, they didn't like it. It's like wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, but you feel a little uncomfortable when we start talking about shifting policy. What's your take on all this?
I mean, clearly he rocked with my mentor, Harry Belafonte. But as we sit here on the 93rd birthday of the late, great Dr. King, who in 1963 had testified and said that the tragedy that we have a Congress with a Senate that has a minority of misguided senators who will use the filibuster to keep the majority of people from even voting. They don't want the majority of people to vote because they know that they do not represent the majority of the American people. That was said 59 years ago. And what's important here is that this is not just another issue to agree or disagree on. People's fundamental right to vote is being obstructed. Dr. King, John Lewis, Harry Belafonte, SNCC, all those individuals, so many of our elders fought so hard for our right to vote because there was so much power in it. I think what our sister Angela Rice said earlier, people are tired of the talk and they want action. I think people are rightfully wary of the attempts by Democrats to get political points by speaking up about this. But if it wasn't for organizations like Black Voters Matter, Woke Vote, Voto Latino, that are proud partners of the gathering, I think these politicians would just continue like it's business as usual. Really, it's these groups that are continuing to fight and continue to keep the legacy of Dr. King. I don't know if our elected officials really feel comfortable or accountable to us. And I'm actually paraphrasing now, but former President Barack Obama said, even if certain representatives refuse to stand up for our democracy, the rest of us should be able to get the job done with a simple majority vote. We can't allow obstruction to be used. And so we need words put into action. And I agree. Absolutely. I think that at this moment, if people are celebrating Dr. King, their words need to be going into action.
I completely agree. Victor, sadly, we are out of time, but I want to give you 10 seconds at least just to share your thoughts on what's happening right now as it relates to Dr. King.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, like Errin and Carmen said, the best way to honor Dr. King and his legacy is to pass voting rights legislation. That means H.R. 1, John Lewis Voting Rights Act now. And I think what Martin Luther King III said about Senator Sinema's decision to not support voting rights but instead defend the filibuster is exactly right. I don't think history will remember her kindly. I know that my generation is going to be up for the fight to defend voting rights and also hopefully challenge more Democrats and Republicans that won't defend voting rights.
Victor, let me ask you a favor. Whenever you announce your run for Congress, please do it on this show because I see it in your future, my friend. So thank you so much. Thank you, Errin Haines. Errin, I'm putting you on the spot. I want you to come on IG Live with me after the show. We can talk more about voting rights. And Carmen Perez, great job. Glad that you made your debut today. And Victor, you'll be back. Coming up, how student loans are affecting generations. We'll talk about that next.